What is up, everybody? Colin here on sovereignty, freedom, justice, natural law. There's socialism, there's fascism, communism, and these are all defined in different ways. And what people do is they like to debate the different merits or features and say, well, socialism isn't communism or this or that. But it kind of comes down to one thing, and this is this Ayn Rand quote. Either we believe that the state exists to serve the individual or that the individual exists to serve the state. She talks about this a lot in her book, I think it's called Capitalism? I don't know, but it's very, very good. When the state is there to redistribute wealth or make things fair or do things like that, that is the state intervening in the lives of its citizens. Now, how much a state is going to intervene in your life or mine and what you might find acceptable and I might not is going to be a matter of opinion. But there are some kind of baseline principles we can agree on. Like, we agree that you shouldn't kill people, you shouldn't rape people, you shouldn't do things like that. So, like, we have certain laws in place, and we also have, in America, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And most of us agree that that's a pretty good place to start and a pretty good foundation. The problem is all the interpretations and regulations and laws on top of it that's meant to basically stamp out anything that any of us deem is not good. But that comes under the delusion that we can have utopia, or not even that we can have utopia, but that we can enforce utopia, or even worse, that government should enforce utopia. That's why America's been sliding into socialism with, I think it's like 50% of GDP is now government. Like, are you kidding me? And there's a lot of problems in America, right? Now, someone like Ayn Rand would tell you that almost all those problems come from government, intervention, regulation, etc. And I think I agree with that. Of course, it's not all problems. Like, if we had absolute anarchy, which is not necessarily a bad thing when I say that, but if we had just purely free markets and we could transact with whoever we wanted, and it would be caveat emptor or whatever it is, where it's buyer beware. Caveat emptor, I think it is. Emptor. There would obviously be problems with that. Like, some people would get taken advantage of and scam. I mean, people do get scammed today, though, even though we do have like protections. And then there's also a lot of fragilities that come from government intervention, regulation, and there's a lot of unintended consequences that come from mingling in free markets, which is like my gripe with what's going on in America and how we've diverged from a lot of what the foundational ideas around America were, which was a free market, capitalism, and sovereign human rights, like unalienable rights that every human has a right to, is natural law. So it's obviously like so many different things to talk about with this, and I always try to keep things very simple. I try to think, what are the big ideas? What are the first principles here? Now, I believe that governments should not tell anybody how to live, and regulations should not tell businesses how to operate, at least, to a certain extent. I mean, obviously you have things like polluting the environment, and you have things like that where there might be a case to be made for a baseline level of regulation, but that's just not how things work in real life. They don't get implemented that way. There's not real checks and balances. There's not real skin in the game. Government, unfortunately, can do whatever it wants, and when it does things, it does them mostly for the narrative, or the perception, rather than the actual cause and effect, like what actually happens when you write a law or you enact a new regulation or whatever. Who's tracking whether that was effective or not? Governments don't track this stuff. They don't care. They hype it up. They use it for votes and for perception, and then people forget about it, move on to the next thing, and then there's a 4-year cycle. And like, the whole system itself is just ridiculous. It leads to really bad actors, bad incentives. It creates a lot of fragilities. It creates inequalities, and it's just overall bad thing. So while the socialists, or even the communists and fascists, or all of them really, which is just collectivism, which is this idea that government should control how people live and they should take from one, give to another, or whatever, which is actually ridiculous though. Like, because a rich person is not a person, they don't have a right to their property, and then you get into a lot of really bad justifications for that nonsense. But the reality is that all collectivist ideas, I mean, even taxation itself, is taking from one and giving to another. So, like, those without, are they morally superior to those with, or vice versa? It's ridiculous. And it's just a really bad narrative. It's because it appeals to human nature. Humans do not like people above them. We do not like the idea that somebody has more power, wealth, fame, or whatever than us. It's built into our biology in the tribal setting. And, for hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens sapiens, that's us. It's modern anatomical humans. We lived in tribes that were based on mutual equality for everybody. Like, literally, they called it fierce egalitarianism, where if you were above or below, you were shamed, punished, even beaten to get on board, to get on this train with everyone else. And if you persistently did things that were a threat to the group or the identity or the narrative that maintained that cohesiveness, you'd be clubbed in the back of the head, left for dead, or exiled, which is the same thing. This is the fundamental problem with so much of the political narrative. It's around this built-in human, I would say, defect of our mind, where we can't fathom people as we perceive above us. And Mother Nature did that on purpose. She did that because in the wild, when you live in a small group with hunter-gatherers, you're not going to survive if you have people that are doing things that will threaten the group, right? It's pretty damn hard to survive in nature. So if you're hoarding meat, or you're acting weird or shady, or you're too lackadaisy out in the dangerous wild, and you're with a hunting party, and you guys aren't on the same page, you're not focused, you're not communicating effectively, you have ego that gets involved, these things will kill you, or potentially kill the tribe, or others. It's a major risk. And we have brought that evolutionary adaptation to the environment, to the modern world. That's what causes so many problems in a world with 6 billion humans, even now so in today, that are hyper-connected and that can share thoughts, and we don't have actual productive debate or conversation. It's like very one-sided. It's very echo chambery. Yeah, lots and lots of problems here. But the fundamental thing, as always with all this stuff, is like you have to figure out what are the foundations, what are the first principles, and you have to stay hovering around those as much as you can. And so I got a few quotes here that I want to talk about this and try to elaborate in that. But when you ignore first principles, when you ignore natural law, and you justify it by saying that, well, that's not fair, or this person deserves that, or whatever, or you get these really bad confirmation bias based, very myopic justifications for things, you are violating natural law. When you violate natural law, which I believe natural law is, you don't take from one. Every person has a right to his or her property and the pursuit of happiness as it is guaranteed in the Constitution. America is built on personal property rights, and we view that as an unalienable right to your property, your effort. You get the rewards, the fruits of your effort. That is yours. Nobody can take it from you. But in socialism, communism, fascism, you exist for the state, for the greater good. Right? You know how many people have died for the greater good, and how ironically, paradoxically, like the greater good ended up being worse for everybody? This is what people can't understand. Capitalism is for the greater good because it gives every individual the same opportunity to do what he or she wants to do and live how he or she wants to live. A free market, a truly free market, capitalism, true capitalism, is simply, here, I have something of value I want to give you, or pay for, or buy, or exchange, and you're going to give me something I want. It's a voluntary meaning they come together, everybody is happy, each person gets what they want. That's what it is. That's all it is. But it's been bastardized and ruined and propagandized because people don't understand what it actually is. Mostly because their desire to think a certain way or to support a certain narrative is that evolutionary defect that kept our ancestors safe, but now in our modern environment is a huge liability because we can't come to consensus. We can't come to an agreement on things. That's why Bitcoin's the greatest invention for mankind. It's probably going to save us. So, if I had to title this episode, I don't know, an intro to natural law and the importance of capitalism and free markets and truly unregulated natural phenomenon in systems to let it do its thing, right? Yeah. So let's go through a few of these quotes here. Socialism has no moral justification whatsoever. Poor people are not morally superior to rich people, nor are they owed anything by rich people simply because of their lack of success. Charity is not a socialist concept. It is a religious one, an acknowledgement of God's sovereignty over property, a sovereignty the left utterly rejects. So, Ben Shapiro said that, by the way. I mean, the God stuff, I don't, for me, not into any of that. So, I'm not going to speak on that. But this point about poor people, rich people, yeah, nobody owes anybody anything. And this isn't just I consider myself better off than some, so I want to justify this to feel better about myself. What you've actually seen, we'll take the tax code, for example. So when the government taxes the rich and increases tax revenues that way, charitable giving goes down. So then that tax revenue flows into the government, and then it gets mismanaged and wasted. I mean, you should just Google examples of government waste. It's insane how much money they waste on the stupidest things, right? It's a big bloated bureaucracy that doesn't have skin in the game and therefore is not efficient. Free markets are efficient because they have skin in the game, meaning they can lose money or customers. Government can't lose money or customers. It doesn't have to be good at its job. That's the fundamental difference between a free market and capitalism in a regulated, artificially propped up system like Big Food, which has subsidized soy, corn, and wheat at the base, which wouldn't even exist the way it is, and we probably wouldn't have obesity the way we do if that was a truly free market. When you use government, which is basically force, violence, to take from one and give to another, you are violating natural law. And what's really funny about this, or I guess you could say depressing, is that it ends up usually hurting the very people that the government or laws or the narrative is trying to help. Like, let's say the poor, for example. Well, no matter what you think about the current system, and it's got a lot of flaws, or what you think about capitalism, although we don't have capitalism, we have kind of a pseudo-socialist capitalism. The reality is right now, with central banking and a manipulated dollar supply, we have the greatest inequality in the history of humanity happening right now. And every single day that the government or the Fed, which is basically the government, prints more money, that's stealing from everyone. And those that get hurt the most are the poor. The inequality is insane because those that are close to the money printer, the rich people, the banks, like the big boys club, they benefit the most. They're close to the money printer. And that money that gets pumped into the system, as the politicians will tell you, is good for everyone. More jobs, more growth, more this. There's something known as the Cantillon effect. And that money doesn't trickle down to everyone. What inflation is, what printing money does, is it makes all the dollars you currently have, plus your earning power. So, for example, if you're earning $10 an hour, and last year they printed about 20% of all US dollars in existence, you had effectively a 20 to 25% inflation rate, meaning you're now making like $7.50 an hour. And then every year that goes on, let's say it's 1% a month, that's 10 to 12% a year. And the way they're going at it now, it's getting worse. They're accelerating it. It used to be kind of historically 2 to 3%. And then we had sometimes in the past around wartime and whatever, where we had like 10 to 15% inflation, which hurts everybody, right? Every single year, if you're not getting a raise, earning more, saving more, whatever, at that rate of whatever the rate is to which the money supply is expanded, then you're becoming poorer. It's becoming harder. And if you're trading hours for time in that kind of fixed, that lower end economy, like, you are literally drowning. while the rich are getting richer because they own assets. And assets tend to inflate because a lot of those phony dollars go into assets and the price rises. So rich people don't really care about inflation all that much. I mean, at least if they're not holding a lot of US dollars. Now, I care about inflation because it's the most destructive force today, probably. I mean, actually, it is. It's the foundation of everything that's wrong in this world, really. They call it the fiat, standard, the fiat world. So inflation is just one more way that the poor are being stolen from. Yet the narrative from those in power that want to appeal to the poor or make them feel like they've had it hard, and so they appeal to their base prejudices and their biases, they will tell the poor that this is good, or that we need to get more money in the system, or here's your check, here's your $1,200 because you deserve it, this is good. But what's so funny about this is that money that's being given to them is their own money, like it's taxpayer money, right? It's unbelievable. The entire sham of American politics is a complete clown show at this point. But again, those that are hurt the most are those that are the most manipulated and brainwashed by the very system itself. Isn't that depressing? Almost grossly, ironically funny and disgusting. It's only when people become ignorant and corrupt, when they degenerate into a populace, that they are incapable of exercising their sovereignty. James Monroe. This is what the masses of America are. They are basically brainwashed sheep. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I feel bad for these people and I generally want to help them. But it is what it is. They are. They watch the news. They watch the mainstream narrative. They follow politicians. They follow this entire clown show that they think is like a representation of real life. And they buy into all the narrative BS. They buy into things they want to believe, and they ignore information that disconfirms what they believe or what they want to believe. And it's this big echo chamber of nonsense that ends up in a two-party system that's toxic, that everybody's wrong, basically. There's not really any of the, as Aristotle called, the golden mean, which is the truth, which is somewhere in the middle. And nothing gets done effectively. Everything is just like this side versus that side. It becomes this tribalistic warfare nonsense. And when the masses are a populace, when they think this way, when they vote this way, and these large swaths of like us versus them and Democratic versus Republican, people are incapable of exercising their sovereignty because there is no individual. It's just a large groups of people. It's all a shit show. So my hope is that the individual sovereign, Bitcoin in the future, with really the internet being the catalyst for all this, is free markets are going to take over. And if the US does stupid things, we'll go elsewhere. And actually, we're already doing this, and you're already seeing this. The remote, employee, or the remote movement of the ability to work from anywhere in the world is going to put pressure on governments. This is actually why states have better laws than federal. Why? Because states have to compete for citizens. Like California, a lot of people are fleeing California, and millions, potentially billions of tax dollars are going with them because California's been run by morons, and they have that left-leaning liberal crap narrative where let's take from you to give to you, high taxes and all this other nonsense, and they've run the state into the freaking ground. They've been bankrupt for years. Okay? And a lot of people are coming to Texas and Florida, which are freer, more open, more free markets, less restrictions. But at the federal level, it's harder because you have to literally go to another country, and then you have restrictions around passports and visas and all that nonsense. It's just not as easy to bounce around the world, but it's becoming easier when your income is not tied to any one jurisdiction or physical locality. You can go anywhere in the world. I can go in Mexico right now and work from a beach. All I need is Wi-Fi. I can go to Estonia and get an e-residency. I can go live in somewhere else. I mean, eventually in the future, you can literally have different identities and become different people, and the government won't be able to track you. Like it's a very good thing for humanity because the free market is what decides what's best for the most individuals, whereas collective governments do not because of the reasons we've talked about in the show. So I think I'm going to leave it there today. I don't want to go into that a lot, and I'm going to be doing more of these kind of intro to big ideas around government and sovereignty and freedom and Bitcoin and things like that. And I'm going to post them on all the platforms. So Better Man podcast, you'll be hearing this, men. Better Human podcast, which is everyone, you'll be hearing this, seeing this as well. And I would say as a takeaway today, to study history, understand the basics of fiat, dollars, government, the Fed. Just start paying attention to these things. They say it's taking the red pill, which basically means you see through the matrix. If you're following mainstream media, politicians, and if you're hanging on their every word, and if you're falling into likability bias and consistency bias and all these different things, I'm telling you right now, you're not seeing the world objectively, and you're putting yourself and your family at risk because you're playing a game that is already rigged in not your favor. And if you don't take your financial sovereignty into your own hands through things like Bitcoin, maybe some silver, maybe a little bit of gold, if you don't have your passport, if you don't understand the risks in your modern environment and how quickly things can break down, if you don't prepare yourself for the economic collapse that is going to happen when the dollar finally collapses or loses reserve currency status, all these things are going to happen. It just matters when. And all the people that didn't prepare, not the rich with assets. Those with assets are going to be just fine. In fact, we're going to benefit tremendously. I'm not rich, but I have assets. And I don't hold fiat dollars, like, at all. So I quickly convert them to Bitcoin, basically. And I use that as my savings account. Our family's going to be fine. We have passports, we have ammo, we have guns, we have gas, we have food. We're good. But 99% of the population of America is going to be caught off guard, and it's going to be really, really bad. Yeah. So become a student of all these things. Wake up. Take the red pill, as they say. Realize what's really going on. And then decide, using your own judgment and critical thought, which things are worth pursuing, which things are worth preparing for. Like, do you want to go full-blown prepper and have a bunch of things? I would actually recommend against it. I think you should have just enough to maybe get out of the country. Like, we have enough gas to get to Mexico, basically. That's our plan. And then we have our passports, and I have my Bitcoin, which can go anywhere in the world. And I have a little bit of silver for on-the-ground stuff. That is our plan B. And we'll go to a Caribbean island or Mexico or somewhere else where it's tropical and amazing, and we can basically live off the sea and the local land if we have to. We're good. Obviously, if you have a lot of land somewhere in America and you can grow your own food, like, that's another strategy to do that for sure. I just like the ability to get out of the country and not be beholden to any one jurisdiction. So, getting to Mexico is kind of like you could say it's a jumping point to go to anywhere else if we needed to. Because things can change very quickly. We already saw that in 2020. The whole world locked down. I mean, imagine if there was another war or another one of these outbreaks and they try to do things even more strict, or they start tracking people, or they start asking, what's your medical status so that you can even travel, and like other nonsense restrictions like that, which all is just power and control under the guise of it's for your safety, right? Garbage. All right, that's it. Get on the Better Human newsletter at colin.coach. That's Colin with one L. And morebettermen.com for the Better Man podcast. I'll see you in the next one.